Matthew here from Fiberglass Supply. In this video we've got a new one. We've got a SUP that has a delaminated tail. That's not completely new, but what's new on this one's actually covered with Rhino Liner. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the Rhino Liner and get down to the laminate and see what's going on and figure this thing out. So we're removing that off the bottom here, and you can see where I was squeezing it, and it's got some give to it and isn't solid anymore and it's cracked, has signs of dirt and water intrusion. So we want to get that sealed up and fix that. So we've got that Rhino Liner off the bottom and we opened it up, and what we've got in this stand-up paddleboard, which isn't uncommon, is some 1 pound EPS foam. Now the problem is you've got a really big board, you've got one of the lowest density foams that you can get in there, and when people set that down on its tail or they run it into things, the laminate, the fiberglass over it is just not strong enough to keep that from crushing, which is what happened. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to cast a resin tail block into there. So as you notice, I have not removed the fiberglass skin from the top side, not even removed the Rhino Liner from the top side yet, so just the bottom. And I'm kind of chasing that cracked up that side there, so we're chasing that crack up a little bit, and we're going to remove the foam from that area, and then we're going to mix a resin putty that's slow. Definitely you want to use a slow epoxy, even an extra slow would be a good idea, and you want to really load it with 3M bubbles. So we're going to make a putty that's really loaded with 3M bubbles out of a slow cure epoxy. And if you're concerned, you might even want to do this in layers, because the concern is if that epoxy gets too hot as it cures, it will melt the styrofoam in front of it. So this is a little bit tricky, can be a little dangerous. Again, you can do this in layers so that you don't build up too much heat. You can also put bags with water or things like that, put a fan on it to cool it down as it cures. But again, slow epoxy, lots of 3M bubbles. Really load that up with the bubbles. The bubbles will help thin out the epoxy so that you don't get as high an exotherm. So now that we've got that filled, we're going to let that cure, and once it's cured, we'll come back and sand that flush. In this case, we did need to come back and skim it again with a little bit more putty because we had some low spots. But we'll get that 3M bubbles and epoxy cleaned up, blended into the bottom shape of the board, and then we'll move on to the next step. What we'll do next in this case is we want to glass over that whole new tail block area, and we want to tie that into the deck so that there's no cracks or no weak spots. If somebody bumps it or knocks something loose, the water can get into it. So you see here we're spot filling an area that was low on that. So what we're going to do after the spot fill putty cures, we'll sand it again, and then we're going to go and remove the Rhino Liner from the top of the board so that we can do that glass patch over the whole thing that ties it all together. So the Rhino Liner, very interesting. It's a polyurethane product. The best way that I found to get that off was to pull it back on itself and then actually take the heat gun and heat it up a little and soften it and just kind of work that skin. It's like working a skin off. Just peel it back a little bit at a time. If you pull too hard, it would break and you kind of lose what you started. So just working it slowly back on itself and being kind of patient with it. It was bonded really well, but it did peel off ultimately, and not too much heat. So you got to be careful with the heat because you don't want to melt the styrofoam or deform the board or soften up the fiberglass skins too much. So but a little patience, a little heat, and that came off. So again, what we're doing here is we're doing the fiberglass patch over the cast resin tail block, and again, this is just to help tie everything together and make sure there's no weak spots where water could leak in, and double, kind of double reinforce that tail area. In this case, I'm using a 4-ounce cloth. A 6-ounce cloth would be suitable, and we did 4 layers of the 4-ounce. So we've got quite a bit of reinforcement there to beef that up. This tail should not ever have the same problem that it had when it got here, with that cast block in there and then 4 layers of the 4-ounce on top of it. So we'll wet that out, and just using a brush, let the epoxy soak in, and we'll get that wrapped around the board. Once that cures, obviously we've got some darts that we cut into it, and where those fold over, we're going to have some lumps. So once that cures, we'll sand that fair. What our plan is on this board is to replace the Rhino Liner with some spray-on truck bed liner. It's a Rust-Oleum product. It's not going to match color-wise, so we just kind of tried to pick a color that was sort of neutral and wouldn't clash. I didn't go with black because black generates a lot of heat, or it captures a lot of the sun's energy and gets really hot. So we went with a tan color. I've never used that Rhino or that spray-on truck bed liner product before, and so when I sanded this, I sanded it with the anticipation that that truck bed liner would go on as thick as the Rhino Liner and hide some stuff. So I didn't sand it, as fair as I would normally sand a ding repair on a surfboard, for example. What I found was that the truck bed liner spray, the Rust-Oleum product, does not go on as thick as Rhino Liner. So if I was going to do something different in this case, I would actually sand that exactly like it was a ding repair on a surfboard, and I wanted it to blend perfectly. In the end, we were able to get enough of that spray liner on there that it looked good. But from my perspective, I would have actually sanded that a little bit better. So we're going to get that sanded, both top and bottom. Again, like I said, you're going to want to blend that better than we did here. And once we have that sanded, what we will do is we will mask off in preparation for the truck bed liner to go on. And cleaning off our dust there with the vacuum. Best way to clean up dust, if you can, is with the vacuum instead of blowing it back around the shop. So we've got that taped off, and we're using that truck bed liner on there. And we did put a lot of coats on just to build that up and get it blended back as close as possible. And ultimately, here's what it looks like. So it is waterproof. It is stronger than it was when it was originally built, and this stand-up paddleboard will have many more years of life in it.